Imagine navigating the absolute freezing blackness of deep space, floating hundreds of thousands of miles away from home, and suddenly realizing you are not alone. Picture the blinding flash of unexpected lights piercing through your spacecraft window, defying every rule of science. This isn't a Hollywood movie. It is the terrifying reality experienced by the bravest pioneers in human history, hiding a truth that could shatter our understanding of the universe forever. On the 19th day of July in the year 1969, an incredible event occurred in the cosmos, as the historic Apollo 11 spacecraft was executing its final operational approach toward the surface of the Moon. Highly unusual and mysterious illuminations materialized in the darkness, completely dazzling the astronauts on board. Even the most severe skeptics and harshest critics eventually had to concede to the undeniable facts of the situation. The truth was undeniable. Those men actually observed something remarkable out there in the void. The official stance from NASA suggests that the phenomenon was merely reflective moon debris floating near the craft. However, there simply had to be an alternative explanation for what transpired. It truly remains a profound and disturbing enigma. Is it possible that there is an active presence on the lunar surface that the authorities are deliberately hiding from the general populace? Merely a handful of hours before the American astronauts were scheduled to take the first historic steps for mankind on the lunar ground, a group of astronomers working in Germany documented a bizarre illumination emanating directly from the area of the Aristarchus crater. Mission Control in Houston immediately contacted the Apollo 11 crew, asking them to read out and verify the situation. They notified the crew that various lunar transient events had just been reported by observers in the exact vicinity of Aristarchus, requesting them to take a look over the area. The astronauts responded to Houston, stating that they were looking north directly toward the Aristarchus region. Mission Control urged them to observe carefully and report back if they detected anything unusual or worth noting in that sector. What the crew of Apollo 11 witnessed next completely defied any conventional scientific explanation. They reported seeing a specific zone that was significantly more illuminated and brighter than any of the surrounding lunar. The space travelers clearly observed a distinct bright glow radiating from inside that specific crater. Houston eagerly pressed for more details, asking if they could discern any specific variations in colour regarding the illumination. The astronauts answered that there did not appear to be any distinct colour involved in the glow at all. As this critical conversation was actively going back and forth between the spacecraft and the capsule communicator at Mission Control, something went wrong. Suddenly, severe electronic interference disrupted the transmission. Loud static filled the airwaves, followed immediately by total silence. The live audio and video broadcast of this monumental mission completely vanished from the public airwaves for a duration of 8, 9, or 10 seconds. This raises a chilling question. Was NASA intentionally cutting off the public broadcast feed because they desperately wanted to prevent the world from finding out that something was resting on the moon that absolutely should not be there? NASA astronaut Charles Duke strongly disagrees with that conspiracy theory. He was actively working the shift at Mission Control in the precise hours that followed this strange occurrence. He remembers being the primary individual communicating directly with the crew for an uninterrupted 8-hour block until they successfully touched down on the lunar terrain. Looking back, he states that he does not recall any major or significant discussions regarding lunar transients during that time. Yet the lingering question remains, is there a hidden reality out there that the government is shielding from the public? This exact topic has deeply fascinated a prominent lunar scientist named Peter Schultz for many decades. He recalls observing something highly unusual on the moon 40 or 50 years ago, and he quickly recognized that it would be extremely perilous to publish any formal findings about it. The subject matter was so incredibly controversial that presenting it openly could completely destroy a scientist's professional career. Within official circles, NASA categorizes these unusual sightings as transient lunar phenomena, frequently abbreviated as TLP. There are researchers who believe TLP could easily represent something far different from a natural occurrence. While it is true that numerous transient events happen on the lunar surface, getting specific official commentary on them is nearly impossible. The lights seem to turn on and off unpredictably, and if these events are truly artificial, it would completely destroy the long-held scientific narrative that the moon is nothing more than a dead, inactive celestial body. The formal explanation provided by NASA insists that the Aristarchus crater glistens purely because it contains highly reflective geological dust. But Peter Schultz counters this claim by pointing out that the Sun was not positioned correctly to create a reflection off the crater structure when the Apollo 11 crew observed it. Aristarchus was actually shrouded in nighttime shadows when the astronauts travelled directly over it. Therefore, it was mathematically impossible to be a simple glint of sunlight. It had to be caused by something else entirely, leaving it as a genuine mystery. Even though solar glint remains the official answer from the space agency, a large number of independent experts completely disagree. There are reports of individuals losing their jobs simply because they attempted to research and locate those elusive transient phenomena. It is truly astonishing to think about all of those historical records and all of those trained astronomers who insisted they witnessed something real. Despite nobody believing them at the time, were highly likely to be completely correct in their observations. Aristarchus was merely the introductory sighting in a long series of anomalies that caused dedicated moon watchers to believe our closest cosmic neighbour holds far more secrets than humanity realises. Even in the modern era, there are plenty of people who harbour the belief that alien artefacts might exist on the moon, left behind by ancient advanced societies. It makes one think of the classic science fiction film 2001, A Space Odyssey, which prominently features a massive alien monolith buried on the moon. While Earth's moon may be concealing its own dark secrets, the largest moon orbiting Mars might actually represent the single greatest enigma in the entire solar system. The scientific data that humanity has successfully retrieved from the moon, known as Phobos, strongly implies that the celestial body is completely hollow on the inside. This has led to radical theories suggesting it could be the ancient remains of a gargantuan, manufactured space station. If that hypothesis were ever proven true, it would completely alter everything we know about history and science. Phobos is incredibly small, moves at a blistering velocity, and maintains an impossibly low altitude as it streaks a mere 800 miles above the dusty surface of Mars. Furthermore, its orbital pathway is actively degrading and shrinking. Astronomers have calculated that Phobos is on a crash course to collide violently with Mars within the next 10 million years, which is a mere drop in the bucket compared to normal astronomical timelines. This reality introduces some incredibly difficult questions for scientists. In the realm of astronomy, if an object has a lifespan that will only endure for 10 million years, it means it cannot possibly originate from the initial creation of the solar system. It must be a much more recent addition to the environment. How do you explain the sudden appearance of such a recent object? How exactly did Phobos get trapped into such a perfectly round orbit surrounding the red planet? Back in the year 1958, a brilliant Russian astrophysicist named Iosif Shklovsky pondered these exact same dilemmas. When he carefully calculated and measured the precise orbital speed of Phobos, he stumbled upon a truly breathtaking revelation. To his absolute astonishment, the moon was actively fluctuating and changing its speed. But the discoveries did not stop there. It was his rigorous mathematical investigation into the behaviour of Phobos that originally birthed the mind-boggling idea that the moon was entirely hollow. This concept was so incredibly tantalising to the experts working at NASA that it served as one of the primary catalysts driving humanity to send missions to Mars in the first place, specifically to investigate the staggering possibility that Mars possessed a hollow satellite. Because if Phobos is truly hollow, it completely opens the door to an entirely new paradigm of reality. If it is indeed empty on the inside, That serves as a definitive indicator that an intelligent entity deliberately manufactured it and placed it into orbit. Why would any advanced civilization desire to construct a hollow artificial moon in a Martian orbit to begin with? It could serve as an extraterrestrial refueling depot or a primary launching platform for deep space travel. Independent analysts state that if they were responsible for dictates regarding NASA's exploration priorities, Phobos would be at the absolute top of the list. It is a known fact that a massive portion of NASA's financial allocation is tied up in a classified black budget. This highly secretive funding is dedicated to executing covert operations for the military and carrying out classified tasks for intelligence agencies. It is highly within the realm of possibility that one of those hidden agendas involves sending probes to explore celestial bodies and moons that are actually artificial and hollow on the inside. Whichever nation manages to successfully colonize or reach Phobos first might stand to gain unimaginable technological advantages from the ancient intelligence that constructed it. However, successfully touching down on the surface of Phobos represents a monumental technological obstacle that no human space agency has ever managed to achieve. It is highly peculiar that every single time a nation attempts to send an exploratory spacecraft to Phobos, the mission suffers a catastrophic failure for one reason or another. It makes one wonder if an unknown force is actively preventing humanity from reaching that destination. Perhaps our initial successful mission to Phobos will mark a legendary milestone for mankind and for anyone else who happens to be monitoring our progress. On the other side of the debate, a well-known astronomer named J.J. Cavallars remains completely unconvinced that Phobos is an artificial construct. He explains that when scientists perform spectroscopic analysis of Phobos's exterior surface, the data reveals that it is comprised of the exact same elemental matter found in common asteroids. This provides a very strong scientific indication regarding its true origin. If it were constructed from an exotic, manufactured material, our instruments would easily detect it. But if Phobos is merely an asteroid, how could it possibly be hollow? Cavallars explains that Phobos is essentially a loosely aggregated collection of large boulders and fine cosmic dust. Because of this structural composition, there are an immense number of internal voids and empty spaces scattered between the rocks. Consequently, the overall density of the object is exceptionally low compared to the solid rocks that comprise its structure. NASA firmly believes that over the course of billions of years, the relentless pull of gravity slowly dragged stray pieces of orbital debris together. In their eyes, Phobos is nothing more than a giant, chaotic pile of space rubble. It is definitively not an alien space station. Yet, even if Phobos isn't a space station right now, that does not mean it cannot be converted into an incredible one in the future. It occupies the absolute perfect location to serve as a command base from which humanity can thoroughly explore and eventually occupy Mars. If Phobos isn't an operational space station today, we shouldn't worry, because it inevitably will become one. Shifting focus back to our own moon, an extraordinary anomaly appeared to be actively tailing the astronauts during the historic Apollo 17 mission. In the photographic records, you can clearly see a very thin, distinct rectangular shape that appears to be hovering and seemingly flying through the void. Was this an unknown object actively spying on the human explorers? Mission Control can be heard telling the crew to pull back the camera view. What could this bizarre object possibly be, gliding silently above the barren lunar landscape? Was this a silent warning from an alien presence telling humanity to stay away from the moon, signalling that the territory belongs to them and not us? The date was December 14th, 1972, a moment that would be remembered as one of the most significant and proudest days in human history. Apollo 17 astronauts Eugene Cernan and Jack Schmitt were actively planting explosive charges across the lunar surface. The crew was establishing a complex network of highly sensitive seismometers on the ground. The intentional detonations would cause shockwaves, giving scientists critical clues regarding the deep internal structure of the moon. The explosives were a primary component of a major geological experiment designed to map out the profile of the upper lunar crust. Right before the astronauts prepared to depart the area, CERN captured several final photographs of the surroundings. Many years down the road, one of those specific photographs caught the sharp eye of an astronomer named Jim Scotty. As he was carefully analysing the images, he noticed a small, distinct streak standing out against the mostly pitch-black cosmic sky in the upper portion of the frame. He immediately began brainstorming about what kind of natural phenomenon or manufactured object could create such a signature. What was this peculiar, small, rectangular shape captured flying high above the moon's surface? Was it an actual alien craft, or could there be an alternative explanation for its presence? Was something genuinely out there watching our every move while we walked across the lunar ground? Scotty notes that when you encounter an image containing something you cannot immediately identify, you have two choices. You can take a rigorous scientific approach, or you can instantly jump to wild conclusions. He heavily favours the disciplined scientific method. He obtained a high-resolution print of the photograph to scrutinise the shape, and the details gave him a brilliant idea. The astronauts can be heard on the historical audio tapes joking around, with Schmidt telling Cernan that he had his tools of the trade ready to go. Scotty believes the solution to the entire mystery is directly tied to Jack Schmidt's unique role on the mission. NASA intentionally selected him for the Apollo 17 crew because of his extensive academic background as a professional geologist. He was the first actual scientist astronaut to walk on the moon, and to this day, he remains the only geologist to have ever explored another world in person. The audio logs show the intensity of their scientific work, with Schmidt commenting on the highly cohesive nature of the lunar soil. Scientists desperately needed to understand the detailed variations and concentrations of different minerals across the terrain. They wanted to map out exactly where the valuable resources were located. Suddenly, the astronauts spotted something incredible, shouting out that they found bright orange soil right in front of them. The crew spotted undeniable signs of titanium and various other exotic minerals, making them incredibly eager to extend their geographic survey. However, Mission Control informed them that there simply wasn't enough time left, and that they needed to wrap things up. Running dangerously low on life-sustaining oxygen, they were forced to terminate the spacewalk immediately. Right before they climbed back into the lunar module, Cernan asked the mission's geologist a rather unusual question. He asked if he could throw his geological hammer away since they were entirely finished using it. Schmidt jokingly countered that he should be the one to throw it since he was the official geologist on the crew. Cernan relented, telling him to go ahead and hurl it. Jim Scotty believes this exact light-hearted conversation holds the absolute key to unlocking the entire mystery of the floating rectangular anomaly in the photographs. When you look closely, it becomes incredibly obvious that those specific images were captured by Cernan while he was carrying a camera loaded with black and white film. The visual evidence is completely consistent with him taking quick snapshots of the geological hammer while it was actively flying through the air. Just like that, another profound lunar mystery was completely solved. This event brought a dramatic close to a truly golden chapter in the history of human space exploration. Following this mission, mankind never returned to the moon. Years prior, the historic Apollo 12 mission concluded with humanity executing its very first deliberate spaceship crash into another celestial body. The astronauts successfully jettisoned the spent lunar module ascent stage, directing it to impact the moon at the exact coordinates required by science. The researchers responsible for monitoring the impact data received the absolute shock of their lives. The incoming data was completely bizarre and defied all conventional logic. The entire moon began ringing continuously, exactly like a massive church bell. Once a scientist opens their mind to the radical theory of a hollow moon, absolutely every wild possibility is suddenly on the table. Stepping cautiously out of the lunar module, Apollo 12 astronauts Pete Conrad and Alan Bean made history by becoming the third and fourth human beings to ever set foot on an alien world. The experience was utterly mind-boggling, feeling exactly like a classic science fiction story come to life. They knew they had been sent across the cosmos to perform a critical job, so they strictly followed the task checklists attached to their spacesuit cuffs to determine their next operational steps. One of the foundational objectives of their entire mission was a seismic experiment designed to unveil the deep geological composition of the Moon. Crashing a heavy, discarded piece of the Apollo 12 spacecraft into the surface was intended to send powerful, measurable vibrations ripping through the lunar crust. The plan was to separate the lunar module and have it slam into the ground at a precise distance away from a highly sensitive seismometer they had previously deployed. By measuring the resulting vibrations, scientists could accurately deduce what was happening at the very centre of the Moon. The experiment began smoothly with the careful installation of the seismometer, an incredibly advanced device capable of detecting the most microscopic movements in the lunar ground and the deep rock layers below. The very first vibrations the device picked up were actually the heavy footsteps of the astronauts running near it. Mission Control even radioed the crew, informing them that they were actively picking up their footprints as they walked past the instrument. For the next 31 hours, this groundbreaking geological experiment was temporarily put on hold while the astronauts shifted their focus toward other vital tasks. This included the complex construction of a nuclear-powered scientific research station directly on the lunar surface. The seismic experiment officially resumed once the crew's ascent stage blasted off from the Moon into orbit to successfully rendezvous with the command module. Once the lunar module ascent stage successfully docked with the main command service module, and all personnel and collected materials were safely transferred inside, the empty ascent stage became entirely useless. The abandoned spacecraft was effectively transformed into a heavy missile, completely controlled via remote commands by technicians working in Houston. The guidance and control officers reported that the two spacecraft had successfully separated from one another. The discarded lunar module ascent stage was carefully targeted to slam into the terrain roughly 40 to 50 meters away from the primary Apollo 12 landing site. Mission Control radioed the crew, letting them know the module was officially on its way down. Travelling at a blistering speed of nearly 3,800 miles per hour, the abandoned vehicle slammed violently into the Moon's surface. The high-velocity impact instantly blasted open a brand new crater measuring 30 feet wide, triggering an intense moonquake. It struck the lunar ground at the absolute perfect spot, allowing the deployed seismometer to record data regarding the internal makeup of the Moon. The resulting data, recorded by the seismic sensors, left NASA scientists completely astonished and speechless. When the visual graphs appeared on the seismic record, it showed the Moon ringing continuously like a bell. The vibrations simply refused to stop. It was absolutely amazing. Nothing like this had ever been observed in the history of science, leaving researchers wondering what the devil was going on. When Maurice Ewing, the esteemed co-head of the entire seismic experiment, commenced an official press conference a half-hour later, the Moon was still actively vibrating. He informed the gathered media that he would prefer not to offer a definitive interpretation of the data just yet, but he noted that it was as if someone had walked into a church belfry, struck a massive bell a single time, and discovered that the resulting reverberations continued indefinitely. The unique moonquake triggered by that single vehicle impact continued to reverberate for an astonishing 25 minutes. This bizarre result instantly ignited a massive scientific search to find a rational explanation for why there was such a gargantuan difference between seismic activity on Earth, where earthquakes completely dissipate within a few brief minutes, and the Moon, where the ground shakes for hours on end. Radical scientists who were completely willing to think outside the box looked at the data and proudly proclaimed that the Moon is hollow. Once you accept the premise of a hollow moon, absolutely every theory is up for debate. If the Moon is truly empty on the inside, it means it cannot possibly be a naturally occurring celestial body. It would have to be an artificial structure that an advanced entity intentionally built and placed into orbit around the Earth. While theories regarding a hollow moon have been a staple of popular science fiction stories for generations, they clash violently with mainstream academic science. Mainstream scientists point out that the concept of the moon being an artificial space station is nearly absurd when you look at how difficult it is for humanity just to get a tiny international space station into orbit. Trying to imagine an entity placing an object the size of the moon into a perfect orbit seems impossible, suggesting a much larger scientific story is at play. To explain the phenomenon naturally, mainstream NASA scientists theorized that the unexpected, prolonged vibrations actually stem from the extreme lack of moisture and low levels of water within the lunar crust. The planet Earth is an incredibly water-rich world, with vast oceans covering the exterior and immense amounts of water buried deep inside the mantle. When a standard earthquake occurs on Earth, the widespread presence of moisture and water acts like a natural shock absorber, absorbing and dampening the seismic signals very quickly. But on the Moon, the environment is entirely different. There is virtually no water on the surface, and an exceptionally minute amount of moisture inside the deep interior. Without the dampening effect of water, the seismic energy simply echoes through the rock layers continuously, causing it to keep on ringing. Because of this, the sensational idea of a hollow moon remains firmly in the realm of science fiction, at least for the time being, even though the scientific consensus firmly rules out the possibility of a hollow moon. There is another deeply unsettling mystery that mainstream science simply cannot explain. This enigma concerns the astonishingly precise mathematics governing the moon's orbit. The geometric relationship between the Earth, the Sun and the Moon features numerical alignments that are so mind-bogglingly perfect they seem to defy all natural probability. This has led many independent researchers to question whether our moon's position was deliberately engineered by an intelligence far greater than our own. When you study the cosmos, you quickly realize that the celestial dance between these three bodies is entirely unique in our solar system. During a total solar eclipse, the moon passes directly between the Earth and the Sun. What happens next is a visual miracle. The moon covers the disk of the Sun so perfectly that only the Sun's outer atmosphere, the corona, remains visible. This occurs because the Sun is approximately 400 times larger in diameter than the Moon, but it also happens to be situated exactly 400 times further away from the Earth than the Moon is. This perfect inverse ratio allows them to appear as the exact same size in our sky. Mainstream astronomers argue that this spectacular alignment is nothing more than a magnificent cosmic coincidence, a random roll of the evolutionary dice. They point out that millions of years ago, the Moon was much closer to Earth, and millions of years in the future, it will be much further away, meaning we just happen to live in a brief window of time where this perfect match exists. However, alternative researchers find this explanation hard to swallow. They argue that the mathematical odds of such a perfect size to distance ratio occurring by chance on the only planet known to harbour intelligent life are astronomical. Beyond the perfect eclipses, the Moon's rotational behaviour is equally bizarre. The Moon is locked in what scientists call synchronous rotation with the Earth, meaning it rotates on its own axis at the exact same speed that it orbits our planet. Because of this precise synchronization, the Moon only ever shows one side to humanity. We are forever blocked from seeing its opposite side from the surface of the Earth. For the entire history of human civilization, the far side of the Moon remained a complete and utter mystery, shrouded in darkness and speculation. This permanent concealment has fueled endless speculation about what might be hiding on that mysterious far side. If an alien intelligence wanted to establish a base to observe humanity without being seen, the lunar far side would serve as the absolute perfect location. It is completely shielded from Earth's radio interference and entirely hidden from the view of ground-based telescopes. It wasn't until humanity finally developed the technology to send robotic probes and manned spacecraft around the Moon that we caught our very first glimpses of this forbidden territory. What we found there only deepened the mystery. The far side of the moon looks completely different from the near side we see every night. It is heavily battered, saturated with craters, and almost entirely lacks the large, smooth volcanic plains known as Maria that define the familiar face of the moon. Why should the two sides of the exact same celestial body look so radically different? This asymmetry continues to baffle planetary scientists, leaving the door wide open for unorthodox explanations. During the historic Apollo 10 mission in May 1969, which served as the final dress rehearsal before the actual moon landing, astronauts Thomas Stafford, John Young, and Eugene Cernan flew a trajectory that took them directly behind the moon. As their spacecraft glided into the lunar shadow, they lost all radio contact with mission control in Houston, just as expected. For roughly an hour, they were entirely isolated from the rest of humanity, cut off by a wall of solid lunar rock. It was during this period of absolute isolation that something completely unexpected and unnerving occurred. The astronauts suddenly began hearing a strange whistling sound through their headsets. They were deeply startled by the noise, describing it as a weird, eerie kind of outer space music. The sound was so prominent and unsettling that the crew began discussing it excitedly among themselves, wondering if anyone would ever believe what they were hearing. The official transcripts reveal that the astronauts were genuinely baffled. They remarked that it sounded like real space-type music, and they noted that the whistling sound had a strange, rhythmic quality to it. They were so concerned about the public reaction to this anomaly that they debated whether or not they should even mention it to NASA management upon their return, fearing they might be grounded from future missions for reporting hallucinations. For decades, the audio recording of this space music remained classified, buried deep within NASA's vast archives. When it was finally released to the public in recent years, it sparked a massive wave of controversy. Could this strange whistling sound have been a transmission from an artificial beacon located on the far side of the moon? Or perhaps it was a signal from an extraterrestrial spacecraft monitoring the Apollo mission from the shadows? NASA's official explanation for the eerie audio is far more grounded in mundane physics. According to agency engineers, the sound was caused by simple electromagnetic interference between the VHF radios of the lunar module and the command module. When the two spacecraft were close to each other and their radios were turned on, the frequencies interacted in a way that created a harmonic, whistling feedback loop. Once the lunar module landed or moved further away, the sound completely disappeared. While the radio interference theory is widely accepted by engineers, it does not completely erase the unease surrounding the event. Skeptics note that the astronauts were highly trained military pilots and experienced space travelers who were intimately familiar with the sounds and quirks of their equipment. Yet this specific sound caught them completely off guard, sounding so organic and deliberate that they genuinely questioned its origin. The Apollo 10 incident was not the only time human explorers encountered strange phenomena while operating in the deep vacuum of space. Decades earlier, during the height of the Cold War, the Soviet Union was actively running its own highly secretive lunar exploration program, competing fiercely with the United States to unlock the secrets of the moon. While the Americans focused on manned missions, the Soviets excelled at deploying highly advanced robotic probes known as the Lunar series. Several of these Soviet robotic missions returned data that deeply puzzled researchers behind the Iron Curtain. Probes equipped with advanced photographic cameras and scanning equipment captured strange geometric anomalies on the lunar surface that did not look like natural rock formation. Some images appeared to show towering spire-like structures casting incredibly long shadows across the lunar dust, while others revealed what looked like massive, perfectly rectangular blocks. Due to the intense secrecy of the Soviet space program, much of this data was kept strictly confidential, hidden away from Western scientists and the global public. Rumors persisted for years that Soviet scientists had discovered definitive proof of artificial artifacts on the moon, but were ordered by the state to suppress the findings to prevent panic or to maintain a strategic intelligence advantage over the United States. This atmosphere of absolute secrecy was not unique to the Soviet Union. In the United States, researchers and whistleblowers have long claimed that NASA possesses a massive repository of highly sensitive lunar and Martian photographs that have been systematically edited or scrubbed to remove any evidence of anomalous structures. These claims suggest that an elite group within the government is fully aware of an extraterrestrial presence on our neighbouring worlds, but maintains a strict policy of denial to preserve the existing social and religious order on Earth. One of the most famous examples of a suspected planetary anomaly outside of the Moon occurs on the surface of Mars, in a region known as Cydonia. In 1976, NASA's Viking 1 spacecraft was orbiting the Red Planet, searching for a suitable landing site for its sister craft. While snapping high-resolution photos of the Martian terrain, the orbiter captured an image of a massive rock formation that bore a striking, undeniable resemblance to a human face staring directly up into space. The image sent shockwaves through the public and the scientific community alike. To many, it looked like a gargantuan monument, a Martian sphinx left behind by an ancient, long-dead civilization that once thrived on the Red Planet. Nearby the face, researchers identified several other unusual mounds that appeared to form a complex of giant pyramids, leading to theories about a ruined Martian city. NASA quickly dismissed the face on Mars as a simple optical illusion, an example of pareidolia, the human tendency to perceive familiar shapes, like faces, in random patterns. The agency asserted that the combination of low-resolution photography and the specific angle of the sunlight created shadows that happened to look like eyes, a nose, and a mouth. Years later, when higher-resolution cameras returned to Mars, new images showed the structure to be a heavily eroded mesa, largely stripping away the illusion of a sculpted monument. Despite the updated imagery, the Cydonia anomalies continue to hold a powerful grip on the human imagination. Believers argue that the newer, clearer photos were intentionally altered by NASA to hide the truth, or that the original structures had been eroded so badly over millions of years that only a faint geometric outline remains. For these researchers, Mars remains a graveyard of an ancient alien society, waiting to be properly excavated by future human explorers. The idea that Mars was once a living world is no longer confined to the fringes of science fiction. Modern scientific discoveries have completely transformed our understanding of the red planet's history. We now know that billions of years ago, Mars was not the dry, frozen desert it is today. It was a warm, wet world with a thick atmosphere, vast river valleys, and sweeping oceans that may have covered a third of its surface. If Mars possessed liquid water and a stable atmosphere for hundreds of millions of years, it meets all the fundamental criteria required for the spark of life to ignite. This realization has led astrobiologists to launch an intensive search for microscopic evidence of past Martian life. Robotic rovers like Curiosity and Perseverance are currently traversing the Red Planet, drilling into ancient lake beds and analyzing rock samples for chemical signatures that could prove life once existed there. But if life did manage to evolve on Mars, what happened to it? How did a vibrant, water-rich planet transform into a barren, radioactive wasteland? The prevailing scientific theory suggests that Mars lost its global magnetic field early in its history. Without a magnetic shield to protect it, the planet was completely defenseless against the relentless solar wind, which gradually stripped away its atmosphere and allowed its oceans to boil off into space. However, there are alternative, far more cataclysmic theories regarding the demise of Mars. Some physicists have put forward the radical hypothesis that Mars may have been devastated by a series of massive nuclear explosions in its ancient past. This theory is based on the unusual concentration of specific radioactive isotopes, such as xenon-129, found in the Martian atmosphere and surface soil. On Earth, these specific atmospheric signatures are only produced by high-yield nuclear detonations. If a nuclear catastrophe did occur on Mars, it raises a terrifying possibility. Was the Red Planet home to an advanced civilization that destroyed itself in a global conflict? Or worse, was Mars intentionally targeted and annihilated by an outside interstellar force? If either scenario is true, the ruins of that civilization might still lie preserved beneath the Martian sands, waiting to tell a cautionary tale to humanity. The search for answers on Mars invariably leads back to its enigmatic moons, Phobos and Deimos. As discussed previously, the strange behaviour of Phobos has long driven suspicions of artificiality. If Phobos is indeed a hollow, manufactured object, it could be the ultimate key to understanding the lost history of the Martian system. It may hold the records of whatever intelligence once witnessed, or perhaps caused, the transformation of Mars. Humanity's determination to reach Phobos remains unwavering. Despite the string of mysterious failures that have plagued every single dedicated mission to the Martian moon. One of the most dramatic and haunting examples of these failures occurred in 1989, when the Soviet Union launched two identical, highly sophisticated probes named Phobos 1 and Phobos 2. The primary objective of these ambitious spacecraft was to approach Phobos within a few dozen meters, hover over its surface, and deploy robotic landers to analyze its soil. The mission was a massive international effort, with scientists from all over the world contributing advanced instruments to the payload. Success would mean unlocking the secrets of the hollow moon once and for all. Unfortunately, disaster struck early for Phobos 1. While en route to Mars, a simple software command error sent by ground control caused the spacecraft to lose its orientation with the sun. Its solar panels drifted away from the sunlight, draining its batteries completely and rendering the probe completely dead in deep space. All contact was lost, leaving Phobos 2 to carry the entire weight of the mission alone. Phobos 2 fared much better initially. It successfully navigated the long journey through deep space, entered into a stable orbit around Mars, and began sending back breathtaking photos of the planet and its mysterious moon. The spacecraft was working flawlessly, and scientists were ecstatic as the probe moved closer and closer to its final destination. Then, just as Phobos 2 was preparing to release its landers onto the surface of Phobos, something went horribly wrong. The spacecraft suddenly lost its connection with the tracking station on Earth. Engineers worked frantically to re-establish communications, but the probe remained completely silent. Phobos 2 had vanished right at the most critical moment of its mission, when Soviet officials later analysed the final images transmitted by Phobos 2 just before it went dark. They made a shocking discovery. The last few frames revealed a very distinct, elongated shadow cast across the surface of Mars. The shadow was massive, miles long, and possessed a highly defined cigar-shaped geometry that did not match any known natural feature or satellite. Even more startlingly, the very final photograph taken by the camera looking out into space showed an object moving directly toward the spacecraft. It appeared as a bright, linear streak of light, captured right before the probe's power and telemetry were permanently cut off. The visual evidence strongly implied that Phobos 2 had not suffered a random mechanical failure. It had been actively intercepted and neutralized by an unknown object. The implications of the Phobos 2 disaster were staggering. Had the probe encroached too closely upon a classified extraterrestrial installation? Was the hollow moon actively protected by an automated defense system designed to keep primitive civilizations like humanity from uncovering its technology? The incident remains one of the most compelling and chilling mysteries in the history of space exploration, fueling theories that someone or something is actively guarding the secrets of Mars. The biological discovery on the Surveyor spacecraft was only the beginning of a chain of events that left investigators completely stunned. If microscopic Earth organisms could withstand the brutal conditions of the moon for years, it completely changed our understanding of cosmic biology. It forced scientists to reconsider everything they thought they knew about how life spreads throughout the universe, proving that living matter is not necessarily restricted to the planets where it originally evolved. But as the space program pressed onward, the mystery shifted from biological anomalies to massive, unexplained architectural features. During the final lunar mission, Apollo 17, the crew captured a photograph that would spark decades of intense debate among alternative researchers. When the image was first archived, it appeared to be a completely blank frame, obscured by shadow and overexposure. It was entirely overlooked for generations, buried within the vast public photographic logs of the space agency. Decades later, digital restoration experts and independent investigators began analysing the forgotten frame with modern enhancement software. As they carefully adjusted the contrast levels and brought light into the dark areas of the picture, an undeniable geometric shape emerged from the pitch-black lunar sky. Rising from the desolate surface was a towering, three-dimensional structure that bore a striking, undeniable resemblance to a pyramid. The discovery immediately went viral, igniting theories that humanity had inadvertently photographed an ancient alien monument or a massive artificial installation. To some, the structure looked like a heavily degraded fortress, a remnant of a cosmic civilization that had occupied the moon millions of years before humans ever walked the Earth. This concept fed into one of the most fascinating and highly secretive geopolitical narratives of the 20th century, the race to militarily weaponize the lunar surface during the heights of the Cold War. For many years, rumors circulated that both the United States and the Soviet Union had drafted highly confidential blueprints to establish operational military bases on the moon. Recently declassified historical documents have finally proven that these extraordinary rumors were completely grounded in reality. In the late 1950s, a high-ranking United States Army general named Arthur Trudeau developed an incredibly ambitious, top-secret initiative code named Project Horizon. The official military proposal was submitted directly to the Pentagon for urgent review. General Trudeau argued that the United States was facing an existential threat if the Soviet Union managed to secure the lunar high ground first. He warned that if the Soviet military established a base on the moon, they would gain the capability to rain down devastating nuclear missiles onto the American mainland with absolutely zero warning, completely bypassing all existing early detection radar networks. To prevent this catastrophic scenario, the United States Army asserted that building an American lunar fortress had to be treated as a matter of absolute national survival. The declassified paperwork explicitly stated that the construction of a manned military lunar base should be elevated to the exact same priority level as the historic Manhattan Project during World War II. The strategic planners believed that with enough funding, scientific resources, and engineering determination, there were absolutely no technical or scientific barriers that could prevent humanity from occupying the moon for defensive operations. The military architects envisioned a fully operational subterranean outpost that could house dozens of soldiers, powered by advanced nuclear reactors and shielded by meters of solid lunar rock. From this hidden base, the military could conduct continuous surveillance on global adversaries and maintain a permanent nuclear deterrent that was completely immune to a preemptive first strike on Earth. However, a closer, more scientific evaluation of the controversial Apollo 17 photograph ultimately shattered the grand illusion of a secret lunar fortress. When planetary scientists and photographic analysts examined the pyramid image within its original context, they looked at the photographs that were taken immediately before and immediately after that specific frame. The surrounding sequence revealed a series of random, chaotic geometric shapes, including sharp squares and irregular lines, that didn't match the actual geography of the landing site. The mundane truth was eventually revealed to be an optical anomaly caused by the camera equipment. The astronauts were using heavily modified Hasselblad cameras that utilized specialized film magazines. The strange geometric shapes were nothing more than light leaks, severe lens reflections, and mechanical artifacts produced when the film was exposed to extreme glare from the unfiltered sun. The spectacular lunar pyramid was not a monument of an alien empire or a secret Cold War outpost. It was a simple photographic flaw caused by the brutal lighting conditions of the space environment. While the architectural anomalies were successfully explained away by optics, the extreme physical dangers of sending human beings to another world remained completely real. As the historic date of the very first moon landing approached in the summer of 1969, the leadership at NASA was quietly gripped by an overwhelming sense of dread. The public image presented to the world was one of absolute confidence and technological perfection. But behind closed doors, top officials knew that the margin between historical triumph and catastrophic disaster was razor thin. Recently uncovered historical documents have revealed just how terrifyingly close the space agency came to losing its brave explorers. The planners at NASA had meticulously drafted highly confidential emergency protocols to handle a wide array of tragic outcomes. The risks were so immensely high that the White House had to prepare for the absolute worst-case scenario. A secret presidential speech was completely authored and kept on standby for President Richard Nixon to deliver to a grieving global public in the event that the astronauts became permanently stranded on the lunar surface. The chilling text of that standby speech acknowledged that fate had ordained the men who went to the moon to explore in peace would ultimately remain on the moon to rest in eternal peace. The political speechwriters wrote these solemn words because the single most dangerous phase of the entire mission was the engine burn required to blast the lunar module back off the surface to reunite with the command module orbiting above. If that single rocket engine failed to ignite, there was absolutely no rescue capability in existence. The global public would have been forced to watch in real time as Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin slowly ran out of breathable oxygen, trapped hundreds of thousands of miles away from their families. The horrific psychological impact would mean that for the rest of human history, every person who looked up at the moon at night would be staring at an eternal cosmic grave holding two dead American explorers. This nightmare scenario very nearly transitioned from a theoretical concept into a horrifying reality during the final moments of the Apollo 11 descent. As the lunar module, named the Eagle, entered its final braking phase, the automated guidance computer began steering the spacecraft directly toward a treacherous boulder field surrounding a massive crater. Neil Armstrong immediately recognized that landing in such rugged terrain would inevitably cause the spacecraft to tip over or suffer a structural breach, sealing their doom. With less than a minute of fuel remaining in the descent tank, Armstrong took manual control of the spacecraft, overrides the automated computers, and began hovering horizontally across the alien landscape in a desperate search for a smooth, flat patch of ground. Back at mission control in Houston, the tracking engineers were completely silent, frozen in terror as they watched the digital fuel gauges rapidly approach absolute zero. The mission controllers were seconds away from issuing a mandatory abort command when Armstrong's voice finally broke through the static, announcing that the Eagle had safely touched down. The successful landing was a magnificent feat of piloting skill, but it highlighted a fundamental truth about the moon that continues to baffle scientists to this day. Its soil hides secrets that completely contradict our standard models of planetary evolution. This chemical mystery took center stage during the Apollo 17 mission, when astronauts Harrison Schmitt and Eugene Cernan were exploring a distinct geological formation known as Shorty Crater. While walking along the rim of the impact site, Schmitt, who was a highly trained professional geologist, suddenly noticed a striking visual anomaly in the grey lunar dust. Displaced beneath the monochromatic surface layer was a vibrant, bright orange soil that stood out brilliantly against the desolate landscape. The discovery sent an electric shock of excitement through the scientific community, as orange dirt strongly suggested the presence of highly oxidized elements, which typically require liquid water and atmospheric oxygen to form. The explorers collected extensive core samples of the colourful dirt, carefully sealing them away to be brought back to Earth for rigorous laboratory analysis. The preliminary studies conducted in the 1970s concluded that the orange hue was actually created by microscopic volcanic glass beads that had been violently erupted from deep within the moon's mantle during an ancient epoch of volcanic activity over 3 billion years ago. The mystery seemed to be completely solved and settled by standard planetary geology. However, decades later, the narrative was completely turned on its head. In 2011, a team of research scientists decided to re-examine the preserved samples of Schmidt's orange dirt using highly advanced 21st century molecular analysis technology that simply did not exist during the Apollo era. When they utilized microanalytical equipment to scan the interior of the volcanic glass beads, they discovered something that sent shockwaves through mainstream science: definitive traces of water molecules trapped deep inside the crystalline structures. This discovery was radical and entirely unexpected because it completely undermined the reigning scientific consensus regarding the origin of our moon. For generations, mainstream astronomy taught that the moon was formed when a Mars-sized planet collided with the early Earth, melting both bodies and casting a massive ring of dry, molten debris into space that eventually coalesced into our satellite. Under this impact model, the intense heat would have completely vaporized all volatile elements, leaving the moon completely dry and devoid of moisture. The presence of ancient volcanic water deep inside the moon's mantle proved that water has been a fundamental part of the lunar interior since the very beginning of its existence. This realization opens up a profound new frontier for the future of human civilization. If the moon possesses vast, subterranean deposits of water ice and hydrated minerals, it means that the greatest logistical barrier to deep space colonization has already been solved by nature. Future astronauts will not need to engage in the incredibly expensive process of launching massive amounts of water from the heavy gravity well of Earth. Instead, human colonies will be able to actively mine the lunar soil, using the discovered water resources to generate breathable oxygen, cultivate sustainable agricultural crops in closed biomes, and break down the hydrogen and oxygen molecules to manufacture high-grade liquid rocket fuel right on the lunar surface. The moon is no longer viewed as a dead, hostile wasteland, but as a vital stepping stone. A cosmic oasis that will provide the essential life-sustaining resources necessary to propel humanity toward the stars.